there, C3, and welcome to this episode of Tips and Tricks. So excited to have you here. I'm Stephan Bajaio, Chief Evangelist and one of the original co-founders of Conductor. I have my good friend Pat with me.
Hey everyone, Pat Reinhart here, VP of Customer Success and all-around SEO nerd. So happy to be here once again with my bud Stephan, talking about tips and tricks. Stephan, what are we going to be doing this time around?
So yeah, we're going to mix it up a little bit differently this year. We've gotten some amazing industry influencers, customers, conductors, and all in between to give us their tips and tricks about something super important this year, a theme that we're really going all in on, which is collaboration. Really excited to get into it, so let's do just that. It's actually a really good time to be in SEO. And we're going to get into why collaboration is so important for SEO. But it's a really good time to be in SEO because digital transformation has happened. COVID forced that to happen on all these companies. Lots of companies started recognizing the value of search because of the pandemic and not being able to serve their clients, in brick and mortar, having to turn to digital. SEO was a great place, an underfunded place, a place that needed some love and could grow and actually speak to the customers they were looking for because everyone was searching, right? And everyone has been searching. But we find ourselves that in a situation where just having an SEO alone in an organization doesn't necessarily solve your problem.
Preach, brother. That's because it's not just about the SEO alone, right? As Stephan just said, being an SEO alone in an organization, very, very difficult if you don't have the other components to that program, which are what? Your content team and your web team. Because why? Because overall organic marketing requires a cross-functional collaboration between these three teams to be successful. That leads to agility and ultimately leads to progress.
See, the issue is most companies are looking at spend versus return, right? It's all about ROI and ROAS, and that's the traditional way that marketers have gone about looking at, whether or not they're successful or not. But what's so interesting is no one seems to be looking at, or at least the majority of companies we've interacted with are not looking at action versus return. So they're not looking at that agility you just talked about, Pat, and recognizing where there are opportunities to actually make that optimized, dare I say it.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes down to agility or speed and the efficiency of an organization, that's when you really start to look at what type of organization you are. And I challenge everyone right now to look in the mirror, and I've done this many times. What type of company are you, right? Can you, to ideate and launch new content, how long does it take you? Flat growth companies, we see that it takes them 6 weeks, whereas high growth companies takes them 4 days, weeks versus days, right? And then moving on to changing an SEO tag, like a title tag or a meta description, H1, something of that nature. Flat growth companies, we see it takes up to a week, where high growth companies, they do it on the fly, basically in real time in 1 minute, right? And then when you're looking at identifying opportunities and optimizing content, how long does it take you, right? On flat growth companies, we see it takes 1 week, whereas in high growth companies, again, in 1 day. They're moving at a lightning speed. And then when you're talking about making technical SEO enhancements, how long does it take you? Flat growth companies, we see it takes 2 months on average, 2 months. And then versus high growth companies, which takes 2 weeks, which aligns to a pretty standard sprint cycle. So the agility and the speed that you can move plays a big part into how well your program is operating and performing.
Couldn't agree more. It's all about what separates those high growth from the flat growth companies. So let's actually talk a little bit about that. So when you're talking about ideating and launching new content, right? Flat growth companies, they have no alignment, no SLAs between the teams. This is why it has to go through this wavy, windy road to figure out how you're actually going to get the content out the door. Versus cross-functional alignment that has shared goals, that collaboration wins hands down every time. In addition, you want to change an SEO tag, flat growth companies have to fight to actually get the CMS to play nice, file a ticket, and essentially wait. Whereas like high growth companies have access to make changes on the fly. In fact, that's why we built Conductor Live, to kind of get around this problem. If you know what that is, it allows us to actually inject changes directly into people's code in order to make these changes faster than a clunky CMS. Not looking to pitch it right now, but just looking to make it clear we know how bad a problem this is. We built something to solve for it. Identifying opportunities and then optimizing content around them. Well, You can hope that someone will get to it when they do, or you can have a true north, right? And the true north is this idea that shared goals means we all know where we're trying to move to. So that allows that agility that we were just talking about. And then in addition, when you're looking to make technical SEO enhancements, which are not small, let's face it, you have to file a ticket, pray, wait, and justify like crazy when it comes to making enhancements, right? But that's because everything is reactive. Proactive, however, really wins. So if your IT web dev team already understands what you're trying to accomplish, already has a part of their sprint reserved for you, that's a very different world. You're not fighting to get attention. You already have attention devoted to you. Okay, so let's get into it with our friends, our industry influencers, our colleagues. What are the tips and tricks on how SEO, content, and web dev teams can work better together this year?
How you doing? I'm SJ Yun with DanielGale.com. One of the best ways that I can recommend that your SEO team, your content team, and your web development team can get aligned is you get them all in a room together and you figure out what your roadmap is together, what your goals are, and how you're going to get there. And figure out how you're going to measure your success. What are those KPIs, those key performance indicators that show that you're on your way to reaching that goal? You can't get to where you're going if you don't know where you're going first. And you need your whole team together aligned on that vision. Otherwise, you're all working in silos and you're not scaling the way that the brand and your organization expects you to be.
Hi, I'm Christine Schrader, Director of Content at Wpromote, and this year we relaunched our entire website, and I'm sure you guys know how difficult and challenging that can be. But we had to actually look back on thousands of blog posts. We did a full-scale redesign. We rewrote copy on every single page, from our localized pages to our homepage and beyond. And that meant we had to do a lot of communicating between content, design, SEO, and web development, not to mention a lot of executives who had a lot of ideas about how different pages should read, look, and what they should encompass. We wasted a lot of time at the beginning, right? There's a lot of middlemen in this situation, and a lot of miscommunication is easy to have because we're not used to speaking each other's languages. So my biggest piece of advice is learning to speak the language of web development, SEO, design, and content teams, wherever you fall on that spectrum. You are on a marketing team. That means you have all of these amazing skills at your fingertips when it comes to understanding the customer and how they talk and what their intent is and what their challenges and limitations are. Apply that same amazing skill set to your actual internal dealings with other teams that are stakeholders in a website. That's your SEO team, your web development team, your content team, your design team, and often some leadership as well. What moves them? What challenges them? What tools do they have? How can you put requests into the right language so they understand exactly what you're looking for? How do you know what is impossible to do in advance? Do some research, do some digging, shadow somebody on another team, and learn how to better make the case and communicate so this process is streamlined forever. That's the way to get a great website off the ground and make sure everybody gets credit.
So what are the most important things content teams can be focused on right now? There are 3 key areas content teams should be prioritizing. 1, develop a content strategy rooted in consumer demand from inception. That's from the high-level roadmap all the way through to bespoke, tactical content production targeting specific topics and terminology. Optimization should not be a post-publish consideration, but baked into the cake from the start. 2, that the content is organized and taxonomy is clean and well-governed. This will help to inform and provide an opportunity to collaborate with product around site architecture, UX and design, analytic reporting specs, activations, etc. And 3, every piece of content should have clear goals and mapped to business KPIs.
Hey C3, Brian Merritt here with Trustpilot, and I've been asked to answer the question, how do you think SEO, content, and web developer teams can work together this year? You know what I think? My advice would be to make sure you're all embedded together. 3 teams, no, 1 team. Make sure that everyone is working together, both the technical side and the product managers and the project managers and the SEO teams and the content teams are working together to make sure that you're all aligned on the same shared goal. Understand what everyone's priorities are and how you can work together in making sure that your mutual priorities are met. Start with small projects. You'd be surprised at what a big impact a small project can have. And make sure you clearly identify what your goals are. Is it page rank? Is it snippets? Is it authority? Or you're just trying to rank higher than that competitor like we all want to? Once you see the success, the virtual cycle will begin, and that's really where SEO, content, and web teams can all work together to see how much better you can improve your page rank.
How do you get development teams and content teams working better together? That's a hard one. The good news is if you figure this out, you can do the same thing for SEO teams and any other two teams in your organization. What I always tell folks is that one hour or 2 hour training, or the training day that results in 4 hours of video that people then have to go watch again and again and again to get answers to specific questions, is ineffective. Yes, you should do it once a year. It's a great relationship builder. It's a chance to answer questions. Great. But what you really need is a library of immediate answers to immediate questions. So, for example, if I'm the development team, I want to put in something explaining what good markup is. Here's why you use a list. Here's how you use a heading. Here's how you actually do it in our content management system. And make each of those individual items in a larger library that people can go and search and immediately retrieve. Same thing on the content team, right? Say, here's how we like to compress images. Here are the best dimensions for images, things like that. Make it all available at people's fingertips. That kind of ongoing library, that kind of dedication to ongoing learning will take you a lot further, and it'll improve relationships between teams because there's less round trips where one team does something and then the other team says, nope, that's not quite right. And then by the time you've done that 5 or 6 times, both teams are frustrated, and that impacts the relationship. So have that ongoing training resource. That's the best thing I've ever seen as far as coordination between the two teams.
Here at Johns Hopkins, our teams for SEO, content, and web development work together quite frequently on a wide range of digital projects. A couple of areas that I think help us excel are always being really clear on what our goals are, so everyone knows what to work for. Having clear communication, because sometimes the projects might need to be done very quickly, sometimes they take a long time, but always keeping those lines of communication open is very important. Third, really listening to everyone's ideas, because between SEO, content, and web development, we all have different expertise, and blending it together is how we make our own unique and best product. So hearing everybody and collaborating. And then fourth, knowing the deadline and making the deadline. So again, tying all that expertise together, knowing the goal, and making sure you get it done on time is crucial.
It is vital that the 3 teams come to an understanding of how they are going to work. Each team has separate backgrounds and a different way that they work. So for example, our content team has a lot of background in traditional journalism, so they tend to work like a newsroom would. I sit on the web team, and we typically work as a normal digital marketing team would work, and our developers work in an agile sprint session format, which means that we have 3 different ways of doing things, which means that we need to find a way that we can connect together to make sure that we are getting the work done.
So amazing insights as always, everyone. Let's go through what we learned in those videos, right? Number 1 is one of my favorites, right? To have shared goals, priorities, and to start small. A lot of people try to boil the ocean. Stephan, you and I have been through a few of these, where it's like, we're going to do everything at once. And it's like,
I have tried to boil the ocean myself. It doesn't work.
It does not work. A ton of heat is necessary. And, at the end of the day, it comes down to just ask for a couple of hours for your web dev team, right? Have a lunch and learn with your content team and just get them going in small doses, right? You don't have to go all whole hog and freak everyone out right along the way. Which leads into the next one, to create a library or a wiki of common questions each team handles and rules of engagement. This creates a lot of collaboration between folks, and it's like they don't always have to come to you. It's like, oh, they can do it on their time. Very, very important.
I love this one, dude. This is not talked about enough. Like, this was one of the first times I've heard this talked about specifically as like, you don't actually have to be in the room. You can let them do it on their terms. Everyone does that as training, right? And they're like, oh, I'll leave the SEO training with you. And it's like, nah. This is actually a wiki where you can go if you have a quick question and you have a question for how something's done by web dev. Hopefully it's a place that houses that, right? And content has the language of how they use things or what language they choose to use or the way to stop words that are no good and not allowed to be used. All this stuff saves a lot of back and forth time. I think this was really smart. I love this one.
100%. And the next one, again, very important. Everyone, please set goals. Please have KPIs when you're getting into this. Going out and asking these other teams to do stuff without saying because of X, Y, Z. It's just like, hey, I just want to do all this stuff. That does not work. That doesn't foster a collaborative environment. So make sure that everyone understands the goals. And when we do these things, here's how it's going to impact the bottom line or the progress against this campaign, right? Which again leads to the next one, which is communication. Communication is key. You have to learn the other team's language, right? You can't go in as an SEO strategist talking to a web dev team talking SEO. You got to go in talking dev, and you got to go to the content teams talking content. A lot of folks are not familiar, and I have to remind myself all the time, not everyone is as familiar with this space as I am. And I have to go and say, like, how do the content teams operate, right? How do the web dev teams operate? And I have to work myself into their system and not try to create a new one or have them come into mine, right, Stephan?
Preach. I mean, that is so on point. It's crazy how many people just bring their own agenda and they don't think about the other person. It's like all marketing leaves the marketer when they're internal. And that's crazy. It's like, no, you got to market to these people. These people are your colleagues, but they have their own initiatives. And if you're not speaking their language and communicating well with them, that's the same as not communicating with your audience well and then wondering why you're not converting.
100%. And that's, because everyone has their own work style and every team has their own structures, and we have to be respectful of that. And that's one of the best ways that you can get it going. Just be respectful of the process, and they'll be respectful of yours. So I think that those are amazing insights from the videos, and thank you to our friends and colleagues for helping us out with that section.
Loved it.
So coming off all of those great insights, Stephan, let's ask the question, right? What are the most important things content teams can be focused on right now, focusing on that one team? And let's get into the videos to see what everyone had to say.
Hi, my name is Hannah Whalen, and I'm the content strategy lead for Conductor. My advice to content strategists and creators is to start thinking about your content strategy across the board, as your brand's entire digital presence, no matter where it lives on the internet. It's your blog and your website, yes, but it's also your YouTube videos, it's also your answers box, and yes, even your Quora responses. What content strategists need to do is start working with their SEO teams and their web teams to start thinking about that universal brand experience. And in order to do that, you need to bake it into the process from the beginning. There's no SEOing something after it's already created. So what we do at Conductor is we align our SEO strategy and our content strategy from the start. For every piece of content, we send our SEO team a content brief request, which then informs the piece of content and it shapes it. So for example, we can assess value of audience, what they're looking for, their needs, and we bake it in from the start. So we have to remember that no matter what team we're on, we're all a little bit SEO.
Hey everybody, number one tip I can give to content teams right now, look at content repurposing. If you create videos, transcribe them and turn them into blog posts. If you have great slide decks, turn them into blog posts. Got a great blog post? Record it and turn it into audio or video or both. There is no better way to take great quality content and improve the quantity of content you're creating. Take a look at Moz Whiteboard Fridays as a great example. They take videos and then they transcribe those videos. They edit the transcripts, turn the transcripts into great blog posts. They grab individual frames from the videos and use those to be really relevant, helpful imagery in the blog posts. You don't have to have a professional video production team the way that Moz does. You just need to take your best content and repurpose it, and it will always help you not just scale in the classic sense of the word, but deliver great content in more ways that's more consumable for a larger and larger segment of your audience. So content repurposing is my number one tip.
How do you think SEO, content, and web dev teams can work better together this year? 1, starting with education. Democratize the fundamental knowledge around what SEO is today and underscore each team's contribution towards developing a well-optimized website and experience. 2, bring collaboration upstream. Content, SEO, and product teams should be working together from the start. That's from the development of the content strategy all the way through to the CMS configuration, to how the information is architected for the website and the site is designed, all the way down to how and why tracking requirements are put in place and how we're measuring success through to development and then to reporting. And third, ensure that the product and site goals are downstream of and rooted in the content strategy and goals.
The most important things we're focusing on for content here at Johns Hopkins Medicine are we always do SEO optimization. So right now we still see a lot of traffic to our coronavirus content, so we go in very regularly and optimize for SEO around topics about vaccine safety and symptoms. We also, whenever we create new content, we do a really good SEO dive first before writing the article to understand what we have existing content on and where there might be gaps. Third, we like to write to voice of the customer or voice of the consumer, so we keep our health information as clear and understandable and friendly and engaging as possible. And finally, we look for every opportunity to include visuals or videos because people love to get information in different ways, and these are a great way to keep reinforcing our information.
Content teams need to leverage their organization's experience and expertise to help solve their customers' everyday problems. For Sanford, we have a task ahead of us of educating people about the coronavirus, the benefits of getting the vaccine, and how to safely navigate the world, knowing that we are still working through this crisis.
Actually, two parts to this answer. The first is Google your brand name. What you see on page one there, whether they be social sites, review sites like Trustpilot or others, sites out there, go ahead and make sure you've claimed those profile pages. Once you've done that and they reflect your brand and how you want to position your brand, then you sit back. Then you let the consumers do the talking for you. Let them leave feedback, let them fill out content, and then you can come in and you can reap what you just sowed in terms of taking this content, having it to get displayed in Google and search results, because your new search results for page one will look better with consumer content. And then you can take that content and put it on your site, whether it's your testimonials page, your reviews, product, service, or otherwise. You can leverage that content and enjoy the benefits of it.
I run the content team at W Promote, Forrester's top performance marketing agency. You might notice from that title that we tend to focus on the bottom of the funnel, but content people like me tend to feel most comfortable way up at the top, where we're creating educational content, engaging, entertaining experiences, and kind of emotionally connecting with customers. But we can bring that content magic to the bottom. We know that customers in every vertical, across every industry, are focusing more and more on a seamless customer experience. They don't want to feel like all of these channels are disconnected. So try to start putting together a friends of content list. Those are people that are working on different teams that might be siloed in your organization, but you need to understand the full customer journey in every way your brand is touching customers. Set up a bi-weekly win room where you guys come together and figure out what's going on. That gives you the opportunity to move budget, to go up the funnel and create content that is actually in line with what's happening in the bottom, and learn how to feed that paid data back into your organic knowledge. So make sure that you're not just focusing on your job, but the entirety of how your customer is experiencing your brand. And then you can't go wrong.
One of the most important things that I think your content team can focus on is really quality over quantity. So many brands and websites are focused on content dumping just to get so much web traffic that they're not even really concerned with, are they getting the right traffic to their website? Are they getting the right content to pull them in there to get the quality conversions and create that relationship that you want between a brand and a user? So really take stock of what's going on and really audit it and remove whatever is unnecessary. I'll give you the quick, perfect example of a user who's typing in something, looking for golf equipment. They go on a website, they see a great post about golf equipment, but they see the products that they sell are all tennis equipment related. So you really want to take a look at that and see, does it align with what your goals are?
Wow, those were awesome insights. There are some really great points that we should hone in on. I think repurposing your content, I know everyone's heard it. It's not news. However, just think about this, this tips and tricks session, right? We have all these amazing people. They've all given us their thoughts, 1 minute each pretty much. All of that can be made into social content. We could be converting the videos into transcriptions, using those as key insights. We can turn this whole thing into a blog post. We can take the slides, put them on slideware. There's just so much you can do with content. You got to stop thinking about it with blinders. This is so much work to build even something that ends up being 45 minutes or even a 20-minute presentation, for example. And we forget that like that actually has value. It just, people are going to find it through their own mediums and methods. We should be looking to repurpose content in the most meaningful way. And I think content teams like that. They like the idea of not just being, stuck heads down and we're only writing for the website, right? Enhance your brand using reviews and user-generated content, often overlooked. I think, Pat, there's some interesting stuff going on right now, even with this, right?
100%. Google just released an algorithm update, the product reviews update, and it is having a big impact on, like rich review content. Don't ignore your user base. Make them work for you. Like it's a symbiotic relationship. Don't discount that user-generated content. Rich reviews going to be even more important moving forward.
Yeah, another point that was made here was don't lose sight of quality over quantity, right? And I think that's an interesting mix. I think people over-index one way or the other. I'm very interested in seeing how much quantity you can put out and then revise to look for where you lost your quantity along the way. Your quality along the way was lost because of your efforts for quantity. Those words.
100%. And be hard on yourself. You know what I mean? Make that content work for you. If it, give yourself strict deadlines, give yourself strict rules. If a piece of content isn't working for you after a period of time, do something about it. Redo it, repurpose it, do something about it. But be hard on yourself about this.
I love that. I mean, also, it kind of leads into this idea of leaning on your organizational wisdom, right? Within the proverbial walls or the digital walls, or I don't know anymore because we're not all sitting in offices anymore, so I don't think there are walls. The walls of your house, there are a lot of experts. There's an expert hiding over there. No, experts. There are a lot of experts within your organization, and you're not necessarily using them. They are, when we talk about EAT and we talk about all this expertise and stuff, it's weird to me that companies don't go and use their executives and people who have been in the space for decades, right, and have tremendous insights. Help them, write content with them, collaborate. These are people that have tremendous wisdom and can actually share that wisdom in a way, shape, and form that others in the industry will really value, and it will draw people to your brand. I think people miss out on that a lot. Developing a content strategy up and down the customer journey, this is a really important one to me. I feel like everyone thinks of this as a funnel, right? And that's we need to wipe our brains of that. Consumers, especially now, right? They don't buy something once from you. They're going to, hopefully, or else we've done something probably wrong, or you're one of those weird products that you only sell one of. But the reality is it's more of an hourglass, right? They get to the other side of purchase. This is where you want to engage them too. You want to make them into loyal customers. You want to make them come back and think about how great your brand is and how easy it is to find information to solve their problems when they're looking to use your products and services. This should not be forgotten for the quote-unquote dollars we think live at the top, because if you have a leaky bucket, your competitor's picking up all the water. In addition, think of your brand across digital properties. I love this one too. Reinhart, think about this one. Do you have examples? Can you think of like a way to think of your brand across digital properties?
Yeah, think about this. Like when you Google something, does the SERP or the search engine result page, does that tell a good story about your brand? Because it's not just about your .com, right? It's about your YouTube presence. It's about your knowledge panel. It's about the images that are associated with your site. It's your entire presence. On that SERP and online. When people go and they Google your brand, does that page tell a good story about you? It's not just about paying attention to your .com. It's about paying attention to your entire presence online. So take that into account when you're looking at your brand.
All right, so we asked, what advice would you give on how to best work with a content team?
I think it's important to remember that SEO and best content practices haven't always aligned. In fact, many of the keyword stuffing recommendations from SEOs of the past still haunt many content writers today. So remember that, because I assure you, they do. In the modern era of natural language processing, in which the search engines more than ever seem to be at least trying to understand the intent behind searches, content writers need to see your content research not as a mandate for keyword saturation, but rather a guide to the way users are talking about their search needs and the solutions around those needs. In 2017, Gartner Group released a study that indicated that users search 12 times before they ever use a brand in their search. This is an important stat to relay to your content team. They have 12 touch points in which to inject their content and your brand into the conversation so that by the time the consumer is ready to make a purchase, they already know to whom they're going.
Hey everyone, my name is Katie Greenwood and I'm an SEO manager at Conductor. And my advice for SEOs working with content teams is to never underestimate the power of your competitor, because keeping up with the Joneses is a real thing. One of my customers a few years back, which was a very, very popular brand, decided to rename their most popular product, which was backpacks, as digital bags, in an effort to stand out from the crowd and attract a younger clientele because they wanted to be like cool and trendy and all that stuff. And in an effort to stand out from the crowd, they got totally lost. So what we did here was pulled a report to show how well all of their competitors were doing for plain old boring backpack terms and how much their traffic had dropped when they made this switch. So there seems to be this misconception that if you use the boring terms, you'll lose your personality, you'll lose your style, you'll lose your cool factor. And that's totally not the case. So when you need to prove a point and show why you have to rank for a certain keyword, go to the competitors. There's a reason we have to talk like this. There's a reason we have to use these phrases. And it's okay to, maybe copy your competitor a little bit, because imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
Hey C3, it's Dan Patmore from Sainsbury's and Argos here. Now, if you want to work with the content team in the best way you can, my suggestion to you is be the wind beneath their wings. Don't talk to them about Google. Don't talk to them about SEO. Talk to them about customer. Share with them what you know as an SEO about customers, about what customers are looking for, about what customers care about. Share with them your keyword research. Share with them your opportunity analysis. Share with them Searchlight by Conductor. Give them the information they need to do a better job. Don't talk to them about Google. Who cares? It's not about Google. Really effective content is about your customers, what your customers care about, and answering their questions. Just enable them to be even more customer savvy than they already are.
The focus today is all about the user experience. So any of your content should be directed at exactly pinpointing how you're useful in the customer's journey. And I know we've heard that over and over again, but it's super important that you align with where the customer is at the moment they are. That is critical to getting engagement. Without that, you see bounce in search, you see bounce in all kinds of areas where you're losing the customer and you should be keeping them. So it's critical to do that. Real hot tip here, take a look inside your internal site search and look for clues as to exactly what questions they're asking. Consumers have been taught by Google to ask in a search box, and they're doing it on your website. Don't miss the opportunity to mine that area for data.
I think for me, it's kind of easy. I begin with the platform. I begin with the enterprise solution that is Conductor. And that's really helpful because I think it helps center things. It's a place where if you're trying to engage with content teams, this is where you bring them. But I'm a big believer that even if you're not just talking about Conductor, but just talking about how to engage with teams, you really have to meet people where they are, right? And that's not to say that you can't help them grow and advance their maturity from an SEO perspective, but you really have to find out what people care about, find out their perspective on the world you're in. So if you're trying to bring SEO to the forefront, are you working with content teams who maybe had a bad experience or who just don't see the value? I'm a big believer in kind of getting everything out and then going from there. And really to meet people, where they are, you have to find good approaches. So in the case of Conductor, we have our plugin, which is our Chrome extension, which is a really easy way to get people kind of ingrained into the sort of the world that we're in an easy way. And I think that's often a really good tactic and can be applied anywhere. Is you just need to find commonalities that bring teams together. And from there, you can grow together.
In my experience, the content team are the easiest allies that you'll ever make. Building relationships within a business is all about how you can help each other, and the SEO and content teams want the same thing, for content on the site to be effective and to bring in new visitors. The data we have as SEOs is data about the users the content team are creating content for, so what they're interested in and how they're looking for it. Giving the team access to this data will help them to do their work more effectively by their own measures and KPIs, so of course they're going to want to use it.
Educate the team about SEO from a what SEO can do for you angle, so how it can help them know what to create, how to structure it, and how to measure its effectiveness. Give them direct access to SEO data if you can. Know which members of the team seem to get it the most and are the most enthusiastic, and follow up with them, collaborating on a piece of content from beginning to end, understanding the topic, understanding the search landscape, creating and optimizing the content, and measuring the impact of it. And then share the outcome of this project with the business afterwards, using it to demonstrate the process that should be used. And if you weren't able to give the team direct access to SEO data, this is a great time to make the case for an SEO platform that would make this process scalable.
Some great insights as always, Stephan, right? And I love the first one, right? Focus on user experiences and customer journeys, using your site search to help you, right? A lot of people don't dig into their site search. They know, a lot of people don't even know it's there. You'd be surprised at how many folks talking about that they actually have it. They have the ability to dig into that, and they just haven't thought of it. So if you do have a site search functionality, go in and mine the ideas in there. Go and mine the keywords that people are using for your services and products. It is a literal gold mine of places where you can get ideas for content and topics that your customers care about, right? Also, think about this, reframing SEO conversations into one about customers. So that one I really like as well, because a lot of times when you're talking about SEO, a lot of conversations become robotic, and people are like, "Oh, these folks just want to get stuff optimized. They're just trying to, get me to implement this," and that's not really what it's about, right? Organic is about the customer. It's about listening to the voice of the customer and then translating that message onto the site. So this one I've always really liked, and I thought it's a great point for people to think that it's not just about let's get all this stuff done. It's like we're doing this to speak to the customer better, right? The research that we do speaks to the customer, or allows us to speak to the customer better, which is a super, super important aspect to pay attention to, right, Stephan?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. I don't even like to talk about, words like MSV. Talk about people, talk about audience, talk about customer. Don't use our jargon when talking to them. That's our jargon, right? It feels alienating to someone. And don't forget, there's still I think I know Keith at some point talks about this, but I know a lot of content teams still have the history of like the days where we tried to convince them to do keyword stuffing and really bad practices, right? That's still somewhere in the back of their mind. So you want to make them realize you're moving towards the same goals. We're not trying to trick a system or game something. People think of us as these like, ooh, but we're not. We're ultimately trying to get great content in front of awesome, customers who really need this stuff.
Absolutely. And and then it's not just about external to the customers, right? The messaging has to go internal as well. So you really should pick a team evangelist. We have one. He's pretty good.
Evangelism? Did you say evangelist?
There he is. And but at the end of the day, all joking aside, pick someone who's going to be the one that is giving the message to internally at the company. I cannot tell you how many times Stephan and I have gone into organizations and have spoken on behalf of our customers to get people on board, but then they become the evangelist in the company. And getting the buy-in is so important. And one of the best ways that you can get buy-in is talking about the competition, right? And I always like this one. You want to get someone's attention, tell them the competition, or especially at the executive level, tell them their competition is doing better than you. And then that is the way that you get it, right in the face. And then they will come and they will be like, what are you talking about? Tell me everything you know. And that's such an important point that people miss, and such an easy analysis that you can do and put in someone's desk and be like, hey, listen, this is why I want to do this. Let's have a conversation. Because then it's not an SEO conversation. It's a business conversation. It's an overall conversation. And this is just a component of how we beat them, right? And then finally, I think another very important point that was made is to use your technology, but also understand the perspective. We mentioned this a little bit before. Talk their talk, learn their process, learn their structure, understand their perspective, and then take the insights that you found from your tech, marry it with their perspective, and then really tie those two together to get a very important message across. And then that is when you really start to get true buy-in and true collaboration within your organic processes.
Yeah, and what's great about that is they'll probably be asking you for access to your tech, which is awesome because that's moving them towards self-reliance, which is amazing. That's the ideal, right? So this collaboration is starting to turn into something that could actually really net us some serious gains.
And speaking of tech, Stephan, let's move on to the tech team, right? What advice would you give on how to best work with a web dev team? let's listen in and see what people had to say.
When it comes to working with a dev team, you really bump up against two main challenges. So the first, and something we're all familiar with, is trying to get our SEO tickets through the dev queue and sometimes getting deprioritized because there's other business units that are just more important. The second is something I think we often overlook, and that's really just to be in the know with what dev is doing at all times. So they're making changes to the website, and those changes don't necessarily come across our desk for approval, but they are affecting the technical health of the site, and it's something we should be mindful of. So the hack here, or the strategy, is really just to hire an SEO with a technical background. So someone who understands and can speak dev language and is also familiar with your CMS platform. So dev is going to be a lot more receptive to working with this person. And instead of just getting a no on some of the larger projects, your SEO will be able to, bring new ideas to the table and help troubleshoot why we might be reaching a roadblock.
Comes down to a lot of communication and understanding. Web developers have their own priorities, SEOs have their own priorities, and those aren't necessarily the same thing. So you need to understand the engineer's priorities, understand that they might differ from your own, understand that they're dealing with things like technical debt, existing site features, and you need to come to some common ground and align on things. So having a strong case on why you're recommending something very much grounded in data and experience that will actually move the needle, that's something that an engineer is going to care about as well. Helps to speak their language, to have some sort of understanding of the technology that they're working with. I always recommend that people learn how to program just a little bit so that communication is more seamless. You don't have to become an expert developer, but it helps to understand a little bit. Whenever I recommend something, I use the ICE framework. That's impact, confidence, ease. This is a framework that's commonly used in product management and engineering. It's something that an engineer will be very familiar with, and it really helps to isolate what is the most important thing that everyone should be working on right now. So speaking a common language really, really helps. Thinking about things in terms of the broader priorities for him, you, and the whole business.
Really, you got to be focused on some important stuff like the core Web Vitals scoring that's happening right now. This is really important to be focused on it from a technical standpoint. Another thing, make sure you've got a very robust, preferably a machine learning powered search system in place. This will do a couple of things for you. It will lower the actual cost of customer service over time for your business as people engage and get the right answers. And two, it'll boost confidence because people will show up on your website, they'll stick there because they're getting the answers they want. That may actually have longer term effects on your reviews as well. So get in there and make sure those areas are technically proficient and best of breed. Really critical that you step up and do this. Don't take the shortcuts.
Working with a dev team is all about getting your work prioritized. Educating them on SEO is still a really valuable thing to do, but most dev teams are bombarded with projects, all of which are good things to do, and getting yours on their roadmap is often about making the most compelling argument for the value of the outcome. With SEO, this can be really tricky. We know that following best practice doesn't necessarily have a direct financial reward, but also that Google updates can come out of the blue, making it hard to understand and communicate the urgency of making improvements. While many site improvements from other teams can have a direct and measurable improvement in metrics, for example, increasing conversion rate, it's important for SEOs to be able to quantify the cost of doing nothing, i.e. if we didn't make this improvement and we were hit by an algorithm change, how much traffic and revenue would be at risk. Make sure you know the value of your non-bound traffic and calculate a few scenarios. For example, if all our keywords dropped by 1, 3, 5 positions. This can make a really clear case that it's something really important to do because of the risk and not because of the potential reward.
I feel like this can be kind of a scary one, because I think a lot of times, and fairly so, us folks in SEO, we look at the development side of things as, oh, these are all these really smart people that are very technical and, who maybe don't have the longest views for our initiatives. But over time, I've come to kind of look at things a little differently. And I think it comes down to the patented 3 Ps, and that's process, people, and perspectives. And by the patented 3Ps, I mean something that I made up about 30 seconds ago. But I really do mean it. You really need to understand the people you're working with and their processes and how they look at things. Perspective is something simple, like, do they think SEO is not valuable? Do they think organic marketing is a channel that they shouldn't care about? That's fine. It's not a bad thing to have people on the other side of an opinion, but you have to kind of get it out there. You have to understand that. I think that's a really important starting point. And then also processes. I mean, you're going to look pretty stupid if you come in and you say, hey, we want you to look at this crawl report, and it just doesn't line up with how the folks that you're asking for assistance do things. And I think that's really the key. I've always found that, looking at crawl data, and especially when you're able to look at things at a big scale, is really important information. I know us on the SEO side, we see it as, this can help with SEO initiatives, but the picture that a really the crawl data can give you of your site is one that, and I've heard this directly from developers and people way smarter than me that do a lot more than just SEO, but often it can provide a picture of the site and an understanding of the website that sometimes they don't have. And I think that's the best way. If you can win someone over in that way, even if you're not winning them over specifically for organic marketing, but you're just winning them over to see that the data and the tools that you're coming with are valuable, that's really the best starting point. And that's, I think, a road to success.
When it comes to SEO, so many other disciplines either see it as hokum or complicated. So democratization of SEO and demystification of SEO has become a bit of a passion for me. I like to tell each of the teams that I talk to that I'm an SEO, but they actually do SEO. And that's true for dev teams as well. This isn't just to cajole them, it's to remind them that they have a definite impact on the organic outcomes of the site. Just remember that your dev team is probably the most requested resource in your company. Everyone wants a bit of their time. And it's also important to remember that most dev teams are either agile or incorporate some aspects of agile into their development processes. That means you can't just walk up to them and ask them to drop everything to help you out. They have sprints and deliverables that they're responsible for. So become a student of Agile yourself. Learn how to build user stories that are broken down into sprint-sized tasks. This will go a long way in getting you into their development cycle.
My advice as an SEO for working with dev teams is to make sure that you are being hyper considerate of their time and resources, because you wouldn't like it if somebody just throws a giant project on your plate on a Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. either. So when you're making requests for the website, make sure to list out all of your requests by prioritization and impact. This is a huge help to the dev team to know the absolute must-haves that need to be done to make the website function and be found on Google, and the maybe not so must-haves are the things that we can put down the list a little bit that need to be done eventually, but they're not going to make or break the site. This can really help improve your dev relations and show that you're going to help prioritize their time, and the things that you're recommending are going to make an impact. Because like I said, you don't like getting those last minute requests for a massive project either with no background or prioritization. So just remember that these people have a lot of tasks on their plate too, and we can all work together to get things done.
Wow, that was enlightening. I actually really enjoyed that. I'm not always the best at engaging the tech team, so getting these insights I think are really valuable. So pushing SEO best practices by calculating potential cost of inaction. This one was a really interesting one to me, which is this concept of like, we've got to basically make them understand, not fearfully, but with data, the potential loss of what could happen with an algorithm shift and all the other things. So if we're not doing the best practices, while they may not net us gains in the moment, it still leaves us at risk. Not everything dev does is supposed to actually net a net positive. They also work on projects like tech debt, for example, that will make sure to reduce and enable the ease of things in the future. So I love the concept of kind of framing it that way and then explaining to them why a best practice doesn't always have to net us a positive, but it can also help protect us moving forward. I think also being considerate of their time and prioritizing recommendations is key. The web dev team is the team that's probably pulled in the most different directions by the org. They have to maintain, grow, and kind of take on new all at the same time. depending on how your organization is structured and what you actually do as a business. But that tends to be a very heavy role with a lot of different responsibilities. So when you just jump in and say, well, here's a list of, my 50 needs, unprioritized and and unjustified, I'm sure you're going to find time in your day to do them, web dev team. I think we're kind of coming in very ignorant, and we probably look that way as well.
Yeah, this is the most important one in my opinion. Web dev teams, as Stephan said, get pulled in the most directions, 100%, with all the different departments that they're serving, and also just keeping the website up and running. So, what we always do is suggest, why don't you, just like barter, to get like a couple of hours in a sprint, or maybe even 1 hour in a sprint, just to get one small thing done. And then you can start to build that relationship. That's a very important point.
Yeah, I think also this next one really speaks to exactly that, which is be aware of what they're working on at all times. Obviously, speak tech, and we've talked about that before, but just because they're working on something doesn't mean, they're going to come and tell you about it. So actually having a roadmap, looking at the things they're doing, checking in, understanding if it's going to have any impact on SEO, but even if it's not making an impact on SEO, building a relationship where you're actually looking at what web dev does is not that taxing. We should be cognizant of what's happening within our web dev. So creating relationships, speaking to them clearly, and then being able to have that understanding is key. I think I really like the way it was broken down by understand people, process, and perspective. I think that's a very clean, the 3 Ps I think that Spencer came up with on the fly. Those are a really great example of focus on these things. Those are things I would say, if you don't know them right now for your web dev team, write down almost like a persona of your web dev team and think about these 3 points and get as many questions as you can that you should start writing out for yourself to figure out who are the people, what are the processes involved with what they do, and what's their perspective, where do they come from, and what do they think about things. This is going to help you maneuver your way through the need of having them help you. And then common framework. I love this one. This was awesome. Have you heard of ICE prior?
I have not. No, this was a new one for me, but I love it. I think it's a great framework. I think it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, so this is interesting too. If there is a framework, and ICE tends to be, Paul Shapiro gave us this one. It tends to be one that he believes a lot of web dev teams use. Go and find out what is the methodology and the framework that your teams use. I mean, that's process, right? In the process perspective, when we just talked about, figure it out. And then when you provide a recommendation, do it in that context: impact, confidence, and the ease. Now, you will say you don't know the ease for them potentially, right? You might not always know that answer, but the fact that you can tell them the ease of you providing the information to them and so on and so forth, you're starting to, again, speak their language. Do you need to know programming? Paul would say yes. I would say, I don't know if you definitely need to know programming, but the fact that you can have this conversation across a common framework is a huge step forward. So that said, what do you feel is the most important technical SEO initiative for people to take on right now?
So for me, we have been pushing a lot of our clients towards speakable schema, and it's something that we've been talking about that's especially important for mobile because Q&A is the way that Google Assistant works. And if you want brand exposure kind of in the future with the Internet of Things, then we think it's going to be less of a screen-oriented experience and more of potentially an assistant-oriented experience, at least for some users. And so when we say speakable schema, what we mean is how to FAQ and Q&A kinds of content. And we have had success with brands who mark up product pages with speakable schema, category pages, definitely blog posts, especially if they're oriented towards how to do something or just clarifying concepts for searchers. So we are seeing that speakable schema gets things to rank better for potentially featured snippets and a much easier way to get into people also ask.
The most important technical SEO initiative that local businesses need to take right now is twofold. First of all, you need to be sure you're using the correct local business schema with every bit of information included. If you're a single location business, that schema code needs to be on your home page. If you're a multi-location business, the unique local business schema code needs to be on each individual location page. The second technical SEO initiative that's vital for local businesses is Google My Business. Your GMB listing is the key to showing up in map packs and Google Maps searches. So you need to be sure you've got your GMB fully optimized, paying special attention to category selection.
So when it comes to what you should be focusing on for technical SEO in 2021, there's definitely been a lot of talk about Core Web Vitals and the fact that Google's going to be unleashing this new algorithm update in May that takes into consideration the different ways that users interact with your website and your web pages, and how quickly those pages load and how quickly they become interactive. So I think that that's absolutely something that people should be focusing on for 2021, just given the fact that Google's made it very clear that this will be part of their algorithm. But that being said, there's a lot of other technical considerations that people should still continue to focus on. So for example, if you go into your coverage report in Google Search Console, we often find that there's a lot of examples where our clients see like tens of thousands of URLs that are being crawled or discovered, but not actually being indexed. So what's up with that? Like, why are there so many URLs that Google's spending time crawling, but not indexing? That could be indicative of a larger systemic quality issue, or maybe there's a bunch of pages that you don't know about that Google's spending a lot of time and resources crawling that you don't actually want to be indexed. So there's always cleanup work that needs to be done. So it's not just Core Web Vitals, there's a lot of other technical SEO considerations that should happen in 2021. So with that, best of luck.
So my technical SEO recommendation is pretty straightforward. It's taking a look at the amount of code that you have on your pages versus content. Especially e-commerce sites, we're guilty of using widgets and plugins and a lot of CSS and JavaScript, things that may add functionality to the website, but really slow it down and cause Google to stumble a little bit. So these things, not only affect the user to some degree, but they certainly impact Google's ability to crawl our content. So it impacts the crawl budget that we have for our site. So look for ways to externalize your JavaScript, maybe optimize your videos and pictures, things that you can do to help Google crawl.
Hi, it's Martha from Schema App. I think that structured data is one of the most important technical SEO initiatives. And let me tell you why. Number one, it helps you stand out in search. Your customer looks for something that's related to your business and pow, there's a rich result with extra information that's super engaging that gets their click. Number two reason, Google's super investing in this area of search. In fact, 52% of their updates over the last 16 months related to structured data. And in fact, they see it as such a great way of bringing information and engaging users that they've used it to communicate COVID information in search. Number three reason, structured data helps all of your content stand out. There's over 32 different features that Google has for rich results, and that number is growing. Everything from FAQ, video, pricing, rating, special announcement, price drop. It's so exciting. Most importantly, if you learn about structured data, you can start architecting your content in order to make sure that you're maximizing its visibility in search. So really designing with structured data and rich results in mind. Finally, if you don't believe me, let's look at the data. Sharp Healthcare from San Diego saw a 566% increase in impressions and 843% increase in clicks in just 9 months after adding structured data with Schema App. Structured data for the win.
Oftentimes, technical SEO that really moves the needle is the technical SEO that you are able to disperse across your entire platform. So think of it like this. If you have a bunch of page templates and you change one thing, you want that to positively impact all the pages on your website. And that is sort of the gist of technical SEO. You don't want to make a one-off on-page recommendation. You want to make changes that affect the entire ecosystem that the website is held in. And that's going to be very, very different for every website. It's going to depend on CMS. It's going to depend on back end, front end, existing issues, prior issues. any sort of like past migration work or other SEO efforts that you've been doing. May depend on technical debt. It really runs the gamut. It might be internal linking. It may be, implementing additional markup on the page or improving features of the page. There is no one single answer. You need to invest in a technical audit. You need to understand your website, and you need to do what's most impactful.
Some great insights as always, Stephan. Again, the big one that everyone's talking about right now is Core Web Vitals, right? Of course, as everyone knows, in May, Google will release its page experience update, which focuses on the Core Web Vitals. And listen, there's a lot of different opinions on what this will be. My opinion is that this will be Mobilegeddon 2.0 and absolutely nothing will happen. And this is just Google continuing to what I always call them, being a polite bully and pushing us in the web in a certain direction. All good, but at the end of the day, I'm not expecting this big bang change, sometime in May when they release this. Could be wrong, of course, could be wrong, but something tells me that I'm not going to be. Next one I love, again, Google Search Console, looking at your Google Search Console coverage report. Google Search Console has come a long way. I used to
way
dump.
better now, way better.
Way better. I used to dump on Search Console because it was so buggy. I hated the interface. It just wasn't being paid attention to. And when Google started to pay attention to it and moved it to the new interface, completely different. I use it every day. It's great. It's great. Batch of tools and reports. It's completely, like a necessity for every SEO to, SEO to be in that report, in that console every day. So definitely, make sure you're paying attention. A lot of people don't use it at all, and that's something that you can get a lot of valuable information. Also, their API has gotten a lot better. You can pull a lot more data out of it, so it's a lot more valuable for people pulling it into like a BI platform or things of that nature. Then moving on, a few points about schema markup, right? So a lot of people have schema markup and have structured data on their site, but I don't think a lot of people focus or pay attention to it enough because a lot of times it's broken, it's not validated, and ultimately not implemented to the degree that it could be, right? And there's a lot of different types. One of them, of course, speakable markup, which is has been around but seems to be gaining steam now, that you can put it on like FAQ pages and Q&A pages. Definitely something that you have to pay attention to, as everyone knows, or most people know. I've had a love-hate relationship with voice search. I think
more hate than love, be honest.
Yeah, more hate than love at this point, but this could be the game changer for it, right? This could make it trackable. This could actually get data back to us, because right now everyone's just kind of throwing their finger up in the air and saying like, sure, Amazon Alexa, they send traffic to my site. Sure they do. Anyway, but moving on from that, that's another discussion for another time. But last part about schema is your local schema and paying attention to Google My Business. I have heard rumblings that the local pack will move from 3 to 2, and there's been a lot of folks.
Bad.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying, there's a lot of people who have seen them heavily testing only 2 results versus 3. So everyone should prepare for that as well, and which will make local schema and paying attention to your Google My Business all the more important, right? Stephan, like on the local standpoint, not for everyone. Not everyone has a local component,
sure.
But going from 3 to 2 is going to be a big deal. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you kidding me? Like, that's not good at all. I mean, for a lot of businesses, right? Yeah. So people are going to be fighting. There's going to be more fighting for spots and harder to acquire. So you better get on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then moving on, of course, page speed. And one of the big components of that is watch your code versus content, right, on the pages so that things are sped up. You want to make sure that there's a good balance there, that you don't have inflated code, that you don't have tags in there, that you don't need a lot of third-party, tags firing that are not necessary. Page speed is becoming an ever important factor. Again, part of the Core Web Vitals, page experience update. Make sure you're paying attention to that. Very good tidbit of information there. And then, of course, looking for large, broad impact initiatives. Now, we said before, do not try to boil the ocean, and that's not what we're saying. It's more the kitchen sink approach, right? A focused effort on a broad amount of things that can have a huge amount of impact, but can fit into like one sprint cycle. So from a technical SEO standpoint, you knock out a lot of stuff in your audits, but you're also mindful and respectful of the web dev team that is implementing them. So amazing insights in that round of tips and tricks. Love it.
All right, well, we didn't want to just leave you on that note, so we asked for some more tips or tricks on how SEOs, contents, and web dev teams can all work together, and here's what our friends told us.
Product management is a practice, and its practitioners come from a wide variety of industries with experience in multiple disciplines. From business engineering and design to SEO, user experience, and journalism, it's this variety of experience that creates a specific mindset, a level of curiosity, empathy, and critical thinking across multiple disciplines and industries. It's this mindset that allows product managers to swim upstream on strategy and downstream to execution. Because product management is a mindset, you have the ability to be the product manager of your domain. By cultivating, developing, and embodying a couple of highly desirable and effective qualities, you'll also get a seat at the table of important conversations. Here are two of my favorite and most important mindset principles to start with. First is to develop a mindset of outcome over output. Don't just provide laundry lists of prescriptive tasks. Think about and clearly communicate how you're providing value and what problem you're solving. Engage your teammates to bring the best ideas to life by facilitating the necessary conversations that focus on solving the same problem while using resources effectively. Second is to be ruthless when it comes to prioritization. I love to use the RICE model to evaluate reach, impact, confidence, and effort, and bring a stack-ranked list of my initiatives and recommendations to the table. Remember, if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority.
One of the biggest problems at larger organizations is team silos. Typically, the SEO, content, and dev teams don't work well together. The main problem here is that there's a lack of understanding between disciplines. The best advice I can give is buy a few beers. If you can get the teams to hang out casually together, people will realize that the other teams are real people too, and a little bit of interaction goes a long way. It's also important to have a few educational sessions between teams. Have someone from the SEO team explain their role and responsibilities and goals to the other teams, and then rotate. The department silos result in blinders where the team members only know about their own role and team goals. So pushback is usually the result of a lack of understanding. When teams know each other and have a better understanding of how everything works together, it's much easier to get everyone to row in the same direction.
Let's talk about how rich results can bring content, SEO, and web dev teams together. A best practice with our clients is to write content with the rich result in mind, right at the very beginning in the planning stage. So when you start thinking about content, get the SEOs to brainstorm with you on what rich result from Google you want to try to achieve for that specific type of content. They can then identify the required and recommended fields that you need to make sure is in the content so that you can get that rich result. So then when you publish the content, and if you have something like Schema app or the structured data are there, bam, you'll get the rich result right at the beginning. So if and when you get to figure this out, this really applies well at scale. So when you start thinking about your content types, you think about the rich results, and then you think about architecting that page so that anything on your website is not just answering that question for your reader, but also getting that rich result. Devs love this way of thinking because it's how they sort of think about architecting at scale on the website. So they can then build the page, make sure all those content elements are there, and then either build the structured data or prepare it for automation for a tool like Schema app. By working together, you're going to all feel amazing about your content being understood by both humans and machines, but also get amazing tangible results. SAP, Advent Health, Keen Footwear have all applied these best practices and seen some awesome results. Check out especially how you can use FAQ. It's very easy to use across many different content types. Best of luck and happy collaborating.
So what we have found to get everyone working together is it doesn't matter how large or small the group of people that you're working with is, you need a system. So everyone needs to know how the system works, how they know what they're expected to do and when they're expected to do it. And this can be different for every group. You can just do it in Slack with email. You can use programs like Asana or Trello, anything like that, as long as everyone is on board and bought into the system and knows exactly how it works and how they fit into the process. And it's super important to get people working together, because if everyone understands the goal that you're moving towards, and not just what you need to do, but what everyone needs to do together as a group and why, that ends up giving everyone just a way better result.
When it comes to SEO teams working better with web development teams or with content teams, I think it really all boils down to communication and making time to actually tell each other about your jobs and your expectations and what you're trying to achieve for the client. So what I like to do with my team is sometimes we hold editorial trainings for content teams where we talk to them about how we come up with ideas from an SEO perspective, how we do keyword research, what does our internal linking strategy look like, or how do we like to write headlines or things like that. And that's all very informative for editorial teams and content teams to learn that information. And then with developers, you really just have to be polite and not pretend like you know more than you actually do, and respect the fact that they often are very well aware of the issues that SEOs tend to bring to the table, and just find a delicate way of explaining, these are the issues that are preventing search engines from effectively crawling the website or whatever the case may be, but do so in a way that doesn't infringe on their ability to do their job properly or make them seem like they're not doing good work. So best of luck with all of that.
Great key insights there. I loved it. Those were awesome insights to round out the end of this. I have to say, the idea that having teams teach each other about their own roles and responsibilities is great. Oftentimes as SEOs, we come in and we just, hey, let me take an hour of web dev's time, or, teach you SEO for an hour to the content team. And it's like, hey, my role's so important. I got to tell you why my job's important and why I exist. And it's like, when has anyone ever done that for you from their team, and how would you feel if that was reciprocated? Mm-hmm. So why don't we reciprocate it? Why doesn't the content team come in and explain their process, their methodology? There's all the stuff we were asking before that we wanted to learn about them. We should invite them to come in and teach us, right? And not just teach us as a department, like actually say, like, Pat does this, and this is what Pat does, and Pat explains what he does. And now I start to understand Pat a little bit better, and I understand his perspective. I get what's going on. That's valuable. Don't let that not happen and be a one-way thing. If it's a one-way, then the road is one way, and you'll never get anything back from them, which is ultimately what you're trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. Using writing for rich results as a way to bring teams together. This was an interesting one, right? I thought this was very sly, on behalf of Martha. She's got a really great point here, which is if I can get the content team writing for the rich snippet as an actual goal, now the content team has a goal that's also the SEO's goal, and the dev team might also be interested in it because it's code. So it's it's kind of a Trojan horse into a shared conversation, right, Pat?
It's interesting. This was one of my favorites of the entire
Agreed. I didn't even think about this, and I'm like, damn, she's good. That's genius.
I know, because what you've done here is you've goaled someone on this, so that so then you're like, oh man, because then you can create reporting around that and say
measure it, the whole thing.
You can create some friendly competition internally, hey, who got the most? You can give someone a gift card at the end of it or whatever. You know what I mean? I love this one. I thought it was
this one was it just I'd never heard that idea before. Obviously, you want them to write for rich snippets, but as a collaboration item, I thought it was just gold, real gold. Use a shared project management system to collaborate. This, I can't even explain enough, right? Usually you're going to have Basecamp, Jira, other things sitting on the web dev side. Then you've got marketing using Asana, Monday, blah, 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 blah. And all these systems don't talk to each other. And you don't have a mechanism to actually be able to project manage through. So even if you did get teams to work on your projects, you got to now have 3 different project management softwares to do it. So, I don't think you're going to go and change that overnight in your organization, but I think if you want to move towards collaboration, you should probably be thinking about how to consolidate some of these items. And I think that's a larger conversation at the executive level, but to say, hey, listen, if we really do want to get collaboration, and here's why collaboration's good, perhaps we should think about collaborating in a shared space.
Absolutely. Could not agree more.
And then the age-old one, right? There's nothing that beats beer and pizza. I mean, it doesn't literally have to be beer and pizza, and obviously that's hard to do in a virtual world. Hopefully when we all get back together, this will be a lot easier to do. But it is something that, building bonds and actually having people understand who they are as humans and as individuals and what their career aspirations are and what their home lives are like. And I'm not saying you have to delve into the personal lives of everyone you deal with, but let's face it, we spend a lot of time at work, and the more you understand the people around you, the better you'll be able to work with one another. So to me, that is just core to what we're trying to accomplish. And if you're looking at this as what can you do for me lately, you're probably looking at it the wrong way.
100%. You can't beat sitting down with someone again, in this world, even if it's over Zoom, but when we do get back together, sitting down, getting to know folks is one of the best ways to get, to collaborate with one another. It's not so it's not so transactional, you put some heart into it. No one wants to just go and buy and sell and buy and sell and buy and sell. People want to connect, people want to have a conversation. And this is one of the best ways to do it. As Stephan said, it doesn't have to be beers and pizza. It could be anything, just sitting down, eating lunch.
And you find something to care about together. I mean, it's like if you can come together, then you can work together. And if you can work together, then you can goal together and you can achieve together. And oh man, there's so much togetherness. It's all over me.
A lot of togetherness.
A lot of togetherness.
And speaking
But I think that really is the core of what we're trying to achieve here, right? It's this idea that, being an SEO is hard. Alone is very hard. And you don't have to be alone. You just have to think about how to turn that marketing focus you've had externally, internally, and think about how we're going to work as teams, collaborate, and actually impact change in our organizations, because trying to do it all by yourself is just not the way.
100%. It takes a village. But someone's got to build that village. So build that village.
Agreed. So thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate all your time. Feel free to reach out to Pat, myself. We love helping people. We love hearing about problems. I guarantee you that problem you probably think is only yours, we've probably heard it a bunch of times. You're not alone in facing the problems of SEO-ness, and therefore you should look to us for help when you can, and we're here to help. So feel free to reach out to us both via LinkedIn or any of the other mechanisms. We're not hard to find. But we appreciate you guys taking the time today, and we hope you're enjoying C3.